The next most important aspect of a programming language is loops or iterations. So just like other programming languages, R does provide a way to repeat sections of code, which is what a loop is, until a certain condition is met. Loops are very useful to iterate through various data structures like arrays or matrices, or going through every row in a data frame. There are 3 statements that can be used to create a loop in R. The for loop, which repeats a block of code but manages the iterating variable until a condition is met. The while loop, which repeats a block of code until a condition is met. And the repeat statement, which repeats a block of code but exits the loop when a condition inside the loop is met. The differences between these loops can easily be seen by using a flowchart. The left flowchart here shows what the while loop does. We have a condition that we're testing, and if that condition is true, it will move into the loop. It will execute some code statements and then return back to the top of the loop to test the condition once again. And it continues this until that condition is false. When it's false, it will drop out of the loop and continue the execution of the remaining part of the script. The second middle flowchart shows the for loop. What it's going to do is we initialize a vector. This vector will represent the number of times the loop will be executed. So for example, we might actually initialize a vector called I, which will have the numbers 1 through 10, meaning that the loop will execute approximately 10 times. I say approximately because there's a way to exit out of the loop. What we will do is we will test the condition to see if the last element of the vector has been reached for this loop. So the loop will execute all the code statements and continue returning until that last element of the vector has been reached. When the last element of the vector has been reached, it will execute out of the loop and continue the execution of the script. Finally, we have the repeat flowchart here. What we're going to do is inside of a loop, we're going to execute some code statements. Again, this will occur until a condition inside of the loop has been met. So inside of the loop, we will basically put some sort of condition to test, and as soon as that condition is met, it will immediately break out of the loop and continue the execution of the remaining part of the script. The while loop tests a condition, and if it's true, the statements between the braces will be executed as part of the conditional loop. So the general form of the statement is while, as the keyword, some conditional expression in parenthesis, followed by a statement or a series of statements in braces. So our example to the left is a equals 1. While a is less than 6, it'll open brace, close brace, it will print a, and then increment a by 1. A is equal to a plus 1. So the resulting output would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Because as soon as a is 6, the loop will terminate. The for loop initializes a vector and loops through each item in the vector. The statements between the braces will then be executed as part of the conditional loop for each element in the vector. The general form of the statement is the keyword for, a value in a particular vector, and for each value it will execute the statement or statements. The initialization part of the loop, value and vector, creates a variable used in the loop statements. Each time the loop executes, the variable is changed to the next item in the loop. So let's look at an example. Here we have an example, my vector equals C1 through 4. So it'll have the values 1, 2, 3, 4. The for statement will have for I in my vector. It creates this variable I, and it will loop through each element in the vector, my vector. So in other words, I will start at 1, then 2, then 3, then 4. And what we see here in this loop is that each iteration through the loop will print the value of I, so the output would be 1, 2, 3, 4. It's useful when iterating through vectors of factors. So for example, if we have DF, which contains 5 columns and 30 rows, the column city is a factor with 3 possible values: Chicago, LA, New York. So what we can do is we can loop through each one of the values within the factor. So for example, I in levels, DF $city, will go through the levels of the particular factor. So we have print I, print as dot character I. The code above will print out the number of each level, 1, 2, 3, and then print out the character value or the name of each level. When dealing with factors, it's important to note that the internal representation are numbers, so if you want the actual words of the factor, you'll need to do the function as.character. Now, there are two statements that allow for the control of the loop to be changed, either by jumping back to the beginning of the loop or by breaking it out of the loop. The next statement will stop executing the current iteration and return to the top of the loop. So here in the flowchart of the loop, we have the condition first. If the condition is true, it will execute a series of statements. And then at some point, we may have a next. What next will do is it will interrupt this loop and bring you back to test the condition again. If there is an iteration like in the for loop, it will jump to the next iteration in the loop. In the case of a break statement, it will stop the loop entirely and exit out of the loop. So it basically short circuits the loop. So here, this break statement in red in the flow control, if one of the statements goes to this break statement, it will then just execute out regardless of where the condition is. So the next and break can be used inside of a loop to control the flow based on certain conditions. In the example below, the loop is going to iterate from 1 through 10. We see that because we initialize I equals 1, and the loop goes from while I is less than or equal to 10. But this loop will only print out the numbers 4 through 7, and then after 7, it will exit the loop. So here we see I is equal to I plus 1. If I is less than 4, next. If I is 1 or 2 or 3, it will hit the next statement and it will jump back to the top of the loop. Since the next statement after that is if I is greater than or equal to 8, that would mean 4, 5, 6, and 7. This statement here, I is greater than or equal to 8, would not be true. So it would jump to the bottom line, which is the print, and it will print 4, 5, 6, and 7. But once I gets to 8, it will hit that statement and then break out of the loop. And so that's why this example will only print out 4, 5, 6, and 7. Now the repeat loop is a loop without a condition, and it breaks out of the loop when a break statement is reached. You have to force it to leave this loop. So here we have repeat, print I. If I is equal to 6, then it will break. Otherwise, it increments I. So to summarize, the repeat loop is actually an infinite loop which will continue until it finds a break statement within the loop.